15 years ago, the arrogance of the white elite Carmichael family suffocated Leah's cries for help. In the freezing cell, Lady Vivian's condescending voice echoed callously like a final judgment.
Do you honestly think anyone in this country will believe a lying black bitch over my son? Plead guilty and I will leave your family alone. Otherwise, I will make your sister disappear as if she never existed.
The small 23-year-old student died in prison just a few days later, carrying with her the unjust suffering concealed by dirty money. Falling to her knees before her sister's ice-cold body in the morgue, Amara embraced Leah's bruise-covered face. Her agonizing cries tore through the heavy silence.
Leah, please open your eyes. I'm so sorry I failed you.
Amara gritted her teeth, blood seeping from the corner of her lips.
But I swear to you, I will make them kneel and pay for your life. Every single one of them.
The agonizing screams of a powerless person shattered against the fortress of authority. But that was also the last time in her life Amara allowed herself to shed a tear. 15 years later, those weak tears had been forged into a billion-dollar technology empire. Tonight, amidst the brilliant crystal chandeliers of the Crystal Dominion Hotel, Amara Kingsley returned. She stood there, silent and dangerous, her proud brown skin entirely out of place among the sea of the white upper class. Vivienne stumbled forward, a martini glass swaying in her hand. Her sharply lined eyes swept over Amara with absolute disdain.
Are black servants allowed to roam freely in the main ballroom now? The service entrance is down in the basement.
Amara turned around, her gaze as flat as a frozen lake.
I'm afraid you've had too much to drink, Mrs. Carmichael. You should sit down before you embarrass yourself.
Vivian's supremacist fury erupted in the face of that calm demeanor.
How dare you speak to me that way? People like you need to learn their place.
A stinging slap fell, leaving the crimson imprint of 5 fingers on Amara's brown cheek. The ballroom fell dead silent. The surrounding white gazes held their breath, waiting for a trembling bow of submission. But Amara did not blink. She slowly smoothed the folds of her dress, walked straight to the MC's podium, and gently tapped the microphone.
Good evening. Mrs. Carmichael seems convinced that I belong to the service staff, perhaps due to the prejudices deeply ingrained in this family's blood. That is an understandable mistake.
Amara smiled, a smile that did not reach her eyes, directed straight at the billionaire Arthur Carmichael, who was standing frozen below.
However, this presents a minor complication for Mr. Arthur Carmichael. Tomorrow morning, Carmichael Holdings was scheduled to sign an $850 million bailout agreement with Omnicrypt. Unfortunately, servants do not have the authority to sign those merger documents. And as of this moment,
that despicable slap had just officially pressed the detonator of an explosive loaded for 15 years, preparing to bury the entire Carmichael empire into the darkest grave. The game had only just begun. The clock hit exactly 8:30 p.m. The Crystal Dominion Hotel wasn't just throwing a bougie top-tier gala tonight. It was basically a sparkly cover-up for a dying empire's flop era. Amara Kingsley walked through the gold-plated doors. Through a micro earpiece hidden under her hair, the cool, unfazed voice of Sloan Mercer, her head of security, came through. Target is at your 3 o'clock. Arthur Carmichael is currently kissing up to the investment banking bros. Vivian Carmichael is chilling at the bar. You ready to do this, boss? Let's get it, Amara whispered back. 15 years of waiting. 6 months of dropping financial traps and setting up dummy shell companies just to drag Carmichael Holdings to this exact night. Arthur Carmichael, the most toxic real estate tycoon in Manhattan, was literally bankrupt. His shady projects, which involved gentrifying black neighborhoods in Harlem and kicking people out of their homes, had totally stalled. His loans were overdue, and the SEC was already snooping around his cookbooks. The man was desperate for cash. And Amara, acting as the anonymous CEO of the tech security giant Omnicrypt, had thrown him an $850 million lifeline. Tomorrow morning, the massive merger was supposed to be signed, but Arthur had no idea that his little lifeline was an anchor tied to his neck. Amara didn't waste a single second faking small talk with the elites trying to network with her. She made a beeline for the bar, straight toward Vivian Carmichael. The plan was crystal clear. Letting Arthur quietly go bankrupt in a boring boardroom wasn't enough. The Carmichael family needed to be canceled publicly, right in front of the media and the high society snobs they desperately wanted to impress. And Vivienne, with her massive ego, Karen energy, and deep-rooted racism, was the perfect trigger. Amara stopped 2 steps away from Vivienne and ordered a water. Almost instantly, the presence of a powerful, stunning black woman triggered Vivienne's deeply prejudiced defense mechanism. 4 martinis deep and clearly buzzed, Vivienne turned and gave Amara a massive side-eye. "I literally told the event staff 1,000,000 times about the security up here," Vivienne said loudly, making sure the VIPs around her heard every word. She took a step forward, blocking Amara's path. "Are you lost? Or did your shift manager forget to tell you that the entrance for the cleaning crew is down in the basement next to the dumpsters?" The vibe in the room instantly died. The low hum of networking from the wealthy crowd stopped dead. People backed up, grabbing their popcorn for what they thought would be a classic rich white lady takedown. Amara slowly turned her head, looking Vivienne dead in the eye. No panic, no embarrassment, just absolute freezing confidence. "I'm afraid you're confused. I don't work here. And honestly, considering your husband's current bank account balance, Mrs. Carmichael, you should be the one stressing about moving to a basement." Boom. That hit a nerve. The reality of the Carmichael family being broke was a top-secret crisis Arthur was fighting for his life to hide. Having a black woman casually drop that truth bomb in public sent Vivienne over the edge. Her massive ego was entirely crushed. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" Vivienne hissed, stepping right into Mara's personal space. "You think throwing on a designer dress puts us on the same level? You people are always so delusional. Someone like you needs a reality check. You need to learn your place." "My place?" Amara tilted her head, the sarcasm dripping from her voice. "My place is holding the lifeline to your rotting family empire, while your place, Vivienne, is just being a parasite living off dirty money drained from innocent people. Sober up." Being roasted in public was too much for her. Vivienne's eyes went wild. Completely losing the plot, she swung her hand as hard as she could. Smack! A full-force slap landed right on Amara's face. The sharp sound echoed across the massive ballroom. The live orchestra literally stopped playing. Hundreds of eyes snapped toward the bar, where a bright red mark was forming on Amara's flawless brown skin. In the minds of the elite crowd watching, the script was already written. This black woman was supposed to start crying, have a total meltdown, and run out of the room in shame. They fully expected the toxic power dynamic to play out exactly as it always had. But Amara Kingsley didn't even flinch. She didn't even touch her cheek. This physical sting was literally nothing compared to the trauma of seeing her little sister, Leah, bruised and bleeding in a jail cell 15 years ago. She had been waiting for this exact slap. It was the green light. "Sloan, lock down all the exits. Don't let a single reporter leave this room," Amara ordered through her earpiece. She turned her back on Vivienne, who was now gasping for air. Ignoring the shocked faces staring at her, Amara walked with pure main character energy straight toward the center stage. The crowd automatically parted like the Red Sea. Arthur Carmichael, noticing the drama from across the room, panicked and signaled his security guards to stop her. But in the blink of an eye, Sloan Mercer stepped out of the shadows. The badass security chief dropped 2 massive guards with flawless knee strikes, leaving them on the floor groaning, totally clearing the path for Amara. Amara stepped up and snatched the gold-plated microphone off its stand. "Sorry to interrupt the vibe." Her voice echoed through the speakers, calm, razor-sharp, cold as ice, cutting through the chaos. "But there's a slight change in tonight's schedule that I think everyone, especially the financial journalists in the room, will want the tea on." Down in the crowd, Arthur Carmichael pushed his way to the front, face totally red. "Who are you?" "Security, get her off the stage. Cut her mic right now." "You don't have the clearance to cut my mic, Arthur," Amara said, staring down the billionaire, "and you definitely can't kick me out. Because the black woman your wife just slapped and called a lowly cleaner over there? My name is Amara Kingsley." Dropping that name was like setting off a bomb. The entire ballroom erupted. Everyone was shocked. Camera flashes started going off like crazy. Arthur Carmichael froze, his eyes wide in absolute horror, his lips trembling as he mumbled, "Omnicrypt? You're the CEO of Omnicrypt?" "Bingo," Amara gave a ruthless smile. "Head architect, founder, and the one person who has total control over whether Carmichael Holdings survives the night." She paced the stage, making eye contact with the pale faces staring up at her. "For the last 15 years, you elites have lived in a safe little bubble. You really thought the law was just a subscription service you could pay for, and that power was an exclusive perk of your skin color. Arthur Carmichael, you spent billions destroying low-income neighborhoods, kicking black families to the curb, and silencing entire communities just to build these soulless high-rises. "Stop! You're making this up," Arthur yelled, trying to climb onto the stage before Sloan blocked him. "Am I?" Amara laughed dryly, pulling a small USB drive from her pocket and plugging it into the main screen system. Instantly, massive, top-secret financial receipts flashed on the giant screen behind her, caught in 4K. Let's look at the stats. Carmichael Holdings literally only has enough cash to survive the next 48 hours. Your toxic debt from the Harlem Project is over $3 billion. The SEC has been quietly investigating you since last week. Your great real estate empire is actually a zombie, just begging for an $850 million cash injection from Omnicrypt tomorrow morning to stay alive. The room completely lost it. Carmichael's shareholders at the party started panicking, screaming into their phones, telling their brokers to dump their stocks immediately. Business reporters were typing furiously. The darkest, most toxic secret of New York's biggest family was just exposed for the whole world to see. Amara looked directly at Arthur. The arrogant billionaire was totally broken now, pale as a ghost, gripping the edge of the stage just to keep from collapsing. "You spammed my inbox with dozens of emails begging for this bailout. You were willing to give up 40% of your shares and hand over the board just to keep the Carmichael name from going extinct." Amara announced coldly, her voice echoing like a final judgment, and honestly, I was going to sign it. But unfortunately, Amara pointed right at Vivienne, who was standing frozen at the bar, looking absolutely terrified as she realized she had just single-handedly ruined her entire family's life. "Your wife just gave me a very clear reality check about my place. And obviously, a low-level cleaning lady doesn't have the legal authority to sign a billion-dollar merger with the so-called elite, right?" Amara turned back to Arthur, her eyes sharp as glass. "So as the CEO of Omnicrypt, I'm officially pulling the plug on the Carmichael Holdings bailout. Have fun filing for bankruptcy tomorrow morning, Arthur." "No, Kingsley, you can't do this," Arthur screamed, completely dropping his pride and reaching out to beg. "It was just a misunderstanding. My wife was drunk. She didn't mean it. I'm sorry. We can renegotiate. I'll give you 50%, no, 60% of the company. You can't just end us like this. This isn't a business negotiation," Amara whispered into the mic, just loud enough for Arthur to hear. "And this is literally just the beginning." Without wasting another second, Amara dropped the mic. The loud feedback screech ended the show. She turned and walked away, back straight, heels clicking flawlessly against the floor. The ballroom was in pure chaos. Carmichael's stock was already crashing in after-hours trading. The screams of the shareholders, Vivienne's sobbing, and Arthur's total despair created the perfect soundtrack for their downfall. Walking out of the Crystal Dominion, the cold Manhattan night air hit Amara's face. Sloan Mercer stepped up and opened the door to a waiting, armored black SUV. "You good, boss?" Sloan asked, glancing at the red mark on Amara's cheek. "I've literally never felt better," Amara replied, her fingers lightly brushing against the teardrop pendant hidden under her dress. Leah's necklace, Tonite, $850 million vanished into thin air, and a toxic empire started bleeding out. But that was just the financial payback. For what Preston Carmichael did 15 years ago, she was going to make them pay with their freedom and their lives. The real villain era had officially begun. Outside the armored SUV, the midnight NYC rain poured over neon streets. Inside, it was so quiet, Amara could hear her own heartbeat and the soft swiping sounds from Sloan's iPad, exactly as predicted. The video of the Crystal Dominion slap broke the internet in less than an hour. It went viral faster than a wildfire. But instead of focusing on the financial flop of the Carmichael empire or Vivienne's assault, the massive PR machine run by the white elite immediately started their classic whitewashing campaign. News channels and commentators started pointing fingers at Amara, completely twisting the narrative to make the victim look like the villain. Headlines flashed with deeply prejudiced buzzwords: "Angry black woman loses control at high society gala," or "Mysterious CEO plays the race card to ruin billion-dollar deal." They were micro-analyzing her every word and blink on that stage, trying to push the narrative that she was just bitter, irrational, and toxic, the exact same tired stereotype society always uses to silence women of color who dare to speak up. "They've got the crisis PR teams working overtime," Sloan said softly, eyes glued to the screen. "By tomorrow morning, the entire timeline will be calling you an aggressive hater, and the Carmichaels will be playing the ultimate victims of a petty revenge plot. Let them post whatever they want, Sloan." Amara closed her eyes, leaning her head against the cold leather seat, sounding insanely unbothered despite being the main character of a trending controversy. Their arrogance is their biggest blind spot. While they're busy obsessing over their aesthetic and media image, they don't even realize the ground under them is literally caving in. The car pulled into a hidden alley in the Lower East Side, far from the bougie lights of Manhattan. Sloan held an umbrella for Amara, doing a quick ocular pat-down of the area before they walked into an old, nameless apartment building with no doorman. This was a burner apartment, a safe house Amara had set up months ago for a majorly important link-up. Inside the dimly lit room, a woman was already waiting at a wooden table. It was Greta Holloway, 44. Greta looked completely drained, with massive dark circles under her eyes from pulling all-nighters, but deep down, she had this unshakable determination. Greta used to be the white compliance director at Carmichael Holdings. She was once part of that power system and benefited from it, but her conscience finally forced her to quit because she literally couldn't ignore their insane corruption and systemic racism anymore. Amara, Greta stood up, her voice shaking a little when she saw the faint red mark still on the CEO's cheek. I saw the timeline. They're trying to cancel you in the media, they can try. Amara pulled out a chair and sat down, her boss energy completely filling the tiny room. But a PR spin can't save a company that's already dead, Greta. Did you bring the receipts? Greta gave a heavy nod. From under the table, she pulled up a metallic briefcase and dropped it on the table with a loud thud. She punched in the code, and the locks popped open, sounding like a loaded gun. The lid flipped up, exposing all the disgusting, toxic garbage the Carmichael family had been hiding for decades. These weren't just normal accounting spreadsheets. This was the blueprint of their cruelty. Greta's hands were shaking as she pulled out the first file. They really thought that because I'm white and the compliance director, I'd just blindly go along with this and bury everything, Greta said bitterly. But they thought wrong. She pushed a stack of printed top-secret internal emails toward Amara. They were written by Vivienne Carmichael herself, sent to HR, packed with slurs, complaining that the company was hiring way too many diverse people, and demanding they cleanse the staff to keep the company's high-class aesthetic. Every single sentence was just dripping with pure racism and disgust. Amara skimmed the papers. Her face didn't change, but the vibe in the room instantly dropped below freezing. Greta pulled out a thicker folder stamped with internal eyes only in red. And these are direct orders from Arthur. Greta swallowed hard. He's not just doing real estate. He's literally destroying communities. Amara grabbed the playbook. Inside were the details of a systematic campaign directed by Arthur to intentionally crash property values in Harlem, the historical and cultural heart of the Black community. By bribing zoning officials, cutting public services, and spreading fake news about crime rates, Arthur forced countless low-income Black families to sell their homes for pennies. He ruthlessly built his wealth on the tears, sweat, and survival of marginalized people. Just to clear the way for luxury high-rises for the white elite, thousands of lives ruined, reduced to just profitable numbers on the Carmichael family's balance sheets. They were literally feeding off her community's trauma. And they wrapped all this cruelty in perfect legal loopholes, a type of invisible violence way more destructive than any weapon. But all those financial crimes, the corruption of a billion-dollar empire, still weren't the sharpest things inside the steel briefcase. Silence fell over the room. Greta's hand suddenly froze when she reached the bottom of the briefcase. She looked up at Amara, her eyes welling up with tears. A heavy, suffocating atmosphere suddenly dropped over them, so dense it made it hard to breathe. Amara, Greta's voice broke. I am so sorry. I am genuinely so sorry I have to give you this. I used all my remaining clearance right before I resigned to dig this out of the Carmichael legal team's secret vault. They used their money to cover it up flawlessly. Greta pulled out a faded, yellowing brown envelope with frayed edges, carefully sealed. She slid it across the table toward Amara. The moment Amara's eyes locked onto the year 2008, written on the edge of the envelope, her heart basically stopped. The hands that never trembled while making billion-dollar decisions were suddenly shaking. The cold, dominant aura she had maintained all night completely vanished, replaced by the most raw, agonizing, and brutal pain. She touched the flap of the envelope like it was burning coal. Slowly, Amara opened it. Pulling out the original police report from that fateful night 15 years ago, the first thing that fell out was a photo. Amara's heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. Right in front of her was Leah, her sweet little sister with a smile like sunshine, the music academy student with hands born to glide over cello strings, now lying on a medical stretcher at the police precinct. In the faded photo, the tiny 23-year-old Black girl was curled up, Her body covered in bruises, her clothes torn, her eyes wide open, holding a level of terror and despair that words couldn't even describe 15 years. For 15 years, Amara had tried to pack away that final image of Leah, replacing it with the soft sounds of cello music and childhood memories at their mother's small house. But this photo ruthlessly ripped away that protective layer, pushing her straight back into the hell of that night. She could practically smell the blood, the hospital antiseptics, and the overwhelming stench of injustice. Flipping to the next page, a name practically jumped out at Amara under the suspects section. Preston Carmichael, the spoiled golden boy of the Carmichael family. The monster who used vile physical force to trample on Leah's dignity and life. It was a case with full evidence, with a victim and a clear culprit that couldn't be denied. And yet, Preston never spent a single day behind bars. He just walked right out of the police station, living a luxurious, arrogant life above the law, all for one cruel and bitter reason. He was a rich white boy, protected by an empire that could literally buy the scales of justice. A hot tear rolled down Amara's brown cheek, dropping and smudging the ink on the old report. It wasn't a tear of weakness. It was the tear of her soul shattering, bleeding out to sharpen itself into the deadliest blade. Amara reached out her long, elegant fingers, gently and carefully caressing her sister's bruised face in the photo, as if trying to soothe the pain Leah had to endure all alone. Her breathing slowed down, got deeper, and when she looked back up at Greta, the tears were gone. All that was left was a raging fire of pure destruction. They really thought the lives of Black people were so cheap they could just buy us off, Amara whispered, her voice stripped of all sarcasm and irony, now sharp as a blade pulled fresh from its sheath. They thought they could rob a young girl of her future, push her to her death, and then go back to sipping champagne in their crystal castles like nothing ever happened. Amara slowly gathered all the documents, the racist emails, the filthy gentrification blueprints, and Leah's photo back into the steel briefcase and slammed the lid shut. The sharp clack echoed like an oath. A half-truth is always a whole lie, Amara stood up, grabbing the briefcase. The curtains covering the past were finally fully pulled back. The wound from 15 years ago never healed. It just festered and fueled a legendary rage. Arthur thinks losing his company is his worst punishment. He's dead wrong. Tomorrow morning, when the sun comes up, I'm going to make that entire family drop to their knees before the throne of truth, and I will personally take back every drop of blood they stole. The rain kept pouring outside, but inside that hidden room in the heart of NYC, a storm a million times more terrifying was officially brewing. The Shadow Alliance was locked in, the broken pieces of memory were weaponized. It was officially time for the self-proclaimed elite to learn how to fear the dark. The screeching of tires ripped through the dead silence of the abandoned underground parking lot. The cat and mouse game was officially over. Preston Carmichael was absolutely terrified. Seeing his billion-dollar inheritance and white privilege lifestyle about to evaporate after the gala, the arrogant rich boy lost all his confidence. To silence Amara and snatch back the briefcase from Greta, Preston resorted to his family's most toxic signature move, throwing money at the problem. He paid heavily for a squad of armed mercenaries to ambush them in the dead of night. 2 unmarked black vans suddenly swerved out of the darkness, completely blocking Amara's armored SUV. Blinding headlights flashed on. 6 massive guys jumped out, flexing automatic weapons and cornering their prey. Hiding behind a concrete pillar, Preston held his breath, fully convinced his expensive goons were about to easily wipe out his problems. But Preston miscalculated big time. He had zero clue who he was messing with. He never expected Amara's female bodyguard, Sloan, to strike back so ruthlessly. The SUV doors flew open. 0 warnings, 0 hesitation. Sloan lunged out like a literal shadow. Before 2 of the mercenaries could even pull their triggers, she snapped their wrists with a flawless razor-sharp takedown. Sloan snatched a gun and spun around, using the butt of the rifle to completely shatter the jaw of a 3rd guy. The sickening crunch of bones echoed, mixed with cut-off screams. Sloan wasn't doing anything extra. Every single hit was a fatal, precise strike. In the blink of an eye, the entire expensive hit squad was completely neutralized, laid out on the concrete in pools of their own blood. Sloan stood up straight, shaking the blood off her hands. From inside the car, Amara stepped out, completely unfazed. Her heels clicked coldly against the floor, echoing like the Grim Reaper knocking on a door. She stared right through the blinding headlights, her fiery eyes locking onto the trembling silhouette behind the pillar. "Come out and face me," Amara screamed, her voice dripping with rage and tearing through the night, but the response was just pure cowardice. Preston, the guy who always believed his skin color and wealth, would protect him from all consequences, turned into absolute mush. The second he saw his goons get destroyed, he panicked, ducked into the shadows, and ran away like a total coward. Let him run. Tomorrow, he won't have anywhere to hide. Amara brushed it off, turning back to the car, escaping the ambush. The armored SUV sped off into the night, heading straight for an old courthouse archive on the edge of the city. It was a rundown brick building, reeking of mold and old dust, where corrupt officials in the justice system dumped incriminating evidence to bury it forever. Amara, Sloan, and Greta broke the rusted locks and snuck inside. They tore through rotting wooden shelves and ripped open dozens of cardboard boxes filled with useless papers. Finally, in the most damp, hidden corner, buried under thick cobwebs, they found a 2008 VHS tape that had been intentionally sealed and hidden away. Amara popped the tape into a dusty old CRT TV they found in the security room. The static hissed before the screen flickered, and grainy footage started to play. The entire room fell into a suffocating silence. On the screen, staring right at Amara, was a 23-year-old black girl. It was Leah. Amara's heart felt like it was getting crushed by an invisible hand. Leah looked so frail, shivering in a baggy orange prison jumpsuit. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation room, the bruises and pure terror were visibly stamped on the young girl's beautiful face. On the screen, Leah was trembling, hugging herself and sobbing uncontrollably as she recounted the horrific night she was violently raped by Preston Carmichael. But the Carmichael family's villainy didn't stop there. Leah's voice cracked, sounding so broken it physically hurt to listen to. She described how Vivian Carmichael, the attacker's mother, used her elite privilege to walk straight into her jail cell. She didn't come to apologize. She came to crush the last shred of dignity from a victim. She called me a lying black bitch. Leah sobbed, pure despair spilling from her chest. They had pushed her into a dead end. On the screen, Leah slowly looked up, staring right into the camera lens. Through the static, across 15 long years, those tear-filled eyes found Amara. There was no fear left, only a tragic, heartbreaking sacrifice. "Tell Amara," Leah whispered, her skinny shoulders shaking violently. "I'm doing this for her." The screen cut to black, leaving nothing but the soulless hum of static. In the tiny room, Greta covered her face, sobbing out of pure guilt. Sloan looked down, clenching her fists, but Amara just stood completely still. She didn't cry. The pain had passed the point of tears and crystallized into the deadliest weapon imaginable. She pulled the tape out of the player and gripped it tight. This tape wasn't just evidence. It was Leah's dying declaration written in blood. Tonight, the past was officially dug up. Tomorrow, this tape would become the ultimate guillotine, burning the entire Carmichael empire to the ground. The real hunt was about to get ruthless. The National Press Club in Washington, D.C. was literally suffocating. The massive hall was packed with hundreds of reporters, top-tier editors, and cameras pointed at the podium like loaded guns. They were all there waiting for OmniCrypt's black female CEO to walk out and give a weak PR apology, some pathetic excuse for losing her cool at the gala, or at least a desperate attempt to do damage control. But Amara Kingsley didn't come to apologize. She came to end their whole careers. At exactly 10 a.m., Amara stepped up to the mic. She was wearing a razor-sharp white suit, a total contrast to her dark, mysterious look from the night before, radiating pure main character energy. No notes in her hand. No crisis PR team or lawyers trailing behind her. Just her, standing fearlessly in front of hundreds of flashing cameras. The room instantly blew up with journalists screaming questions at her. "Mrs. Kingsley, how do you explain your violent behavior last night? Was canceling the merger just a petty personal vendetta? Are you stepping down after this scandal?" Amara just raised one hand. That single gesture held so much power that the entire room instantly shut up. She didn't even bother dropping a weak PR statement to defend herself. She wasn't there to argue with media puppets controlled by the white elite. Instead, she gave a slight nod to Sloan in the control booth. The lights in the hall suddenly went pitch black. The velvet curtains behind Amara slowly rolled up, revealing a massive LED screen, no intro music, no trigger warnings. The screen flickered with the grainy static of an old 2008 VHS tape, and then the footage started playing. It was Leah's tape. The entire press room fell into dead, absolute silence. Not a single camera shutter clicked. Nobody whispered. Even breathing seemed to stop as the bruised, tear-soaked face of the 23-year-old black girl filled the giant screen, taking over the entire room. Leah's shaky, sobbing voice echoed through the press club's surround sound system. Every word she spoke about the night Preston Carmichael brutally assaulted her, Every heavy sob when she described Vivian Carmichael walking right into her jail cell to call her a lying black bitch hit the audience like a truck. That raw, unfiltered trauma couldn't be twisted by any PR spin. It was the brutal, undeniable truth. When Leah dropped her final line, "Tell Amara I'm doing this for her," several reporters in the crowd physically covered their mouths, literally in tears. The tape cut to a black screen, the lights snapped back on, but nobody moved a muscle. The vibe was pure shock and horror. Live broadcast cameras were streaming this exact moment to millions of people across the country and the world. The Carmichael family's darkest, most vile secret had just been exposed in 4K. Now, Amara slowly leaned into the microphone. Her eyes were sharp as flaming swords, scanning the pale, stunned faces in the crowd. "Your luxury condos are built on the graves of our community," Amara stated, staring dead into dozens of camera lenses. Her voice boomed, completely unshaken, dealing a fatal blow to the power system that had protected this crime for over a decade. The Carmichael wealth was stolen straight from black neighborhoods, and their son's freedom was paid for with my sister's life. She looked right into the cameras, knowing perfectly well that the Carmichael family was watching this live stream, having a total meltdown. They really thought their power and skin color could bury the truth forever. They stole homes, livelihoods, and even the lives of the marginalized, then used that dirty money to buy off the justice system. Last night, the media called me a bitter woman out for revenge. But look at that tape and ask your own conscience. Amara emphasized every single syllable, cold and relentless. This isn't revenge. This is me exposing the truth. The empire's meltdown, the Carmichael Empire, was violently shaking. The untouchable fortress Arthur Carmichael built on cruelty and dirty money was collapsing at lightning speed. Minutes after the press conference, Carmichael Holdings stock didn't just drop. It completely tanked to zero. Investment banks instantly froze their credit lines. Business partners were terminating contracts left and right. The phones at the Carmichael mansion were ringing nonstop like a death alarm. In his oak-paneled office, Arthur Carmichael was having a full meltdown, smashing a crystal glass against the wall. His eyes were bloodshot. The PR whitewashing campaign had completely flopped. That tape was a fatal headshot that no lawyer or money could fix. "Do something!" Vivian screamed, her hair a mess, her expensive makeup running down her face. She was trembling as she watched her own face plastered on the news with the caption accessory to murder. "We're losing everything. Preston is going to jail. Shut up!" Arthur roared like a cornered animal. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed an encrypted number. These people weren't used to losing. In the Carmichael family's toxic mindset, when a marginalized person bites back, they don't apologize. They destroy them to silence the noise. "I need a problem solved," Arthur hissed into the phone. "Send that bitch a message, one she'll never forget." To get payback, they decided to target Amara's only remaining weak spot. Her elderly mother, midnight fire and the blood vow in the dead of night. In the quiet suburban neighborhood where Josephine Kingsley lived, the silence was violently shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Josephine, 62, Amara and Leah's sweet, gentle black mother, woke up in a panic from the noise in the living room. Before she could even get out of bed, a loud explosion went off. Windows shattered. The mercenaries hired by the Carmichaels had ruthlessly thrown Molotov cocktails straight into the house. The mix of gasoline and chemicals caught fire instantly, turning the entire living room into a raging inferno in a matter of seconds. The flames crawled up the wooden walls, spread across the rugs, and completely swallowed the only exit. Thick, toxic black smoke quickly sucked all the oxygen out of the air. Josephine coughed violently, stumbling around trying to find a way out, but a wall of fire blocked her. She collapsed to the floor as the flames mercilessly caught the edge of her clothes. Miles away, Amara's phone started blowing up. When she got the notification that her mother's security system was breached and the fire alarms were triggered, her heart literally stopped. Her armored SUV tore through the night at a crazy speed, running every single red light. "Drive faster, Sloan," Amara yelled, her hands trembling as she gripped the seat. The terror of losing her only living family member was tearing her apart. When the SUV slammed the brakes in the front yard, the sight made Amara choke on her own breath. The cozy little house that used to be filled with laughter and cello music was now just a black, charred wooden frame being eaten alive by massive flames. Fire truck sirens blared. Water from the hoses hissed against the fire, creating blinding clouds of white smoke. "Mom," Amara rushed forward like a madwoman, but was held back by two cops. "Let me go. My mom is in there." "Calm down, ma'am. Firefighters just pulled the victim out," the cop yelled over the chaos. Amara ripped herself away and ran toward the ambulance with flashing emergency lights. On the medical stretcher, Josephine was lying completely motionless. She had suffered severe burns across her body and was in critical condition from smoke inhalation. Her skin looked entirely gray, and paramedics were manually pumping a bag to force air into her lungs through an intubation tube. Mom. Amara dropped to her knees next to the stretcher, her shaking hands gently hovering over the skin that hadn't been burned. This scene was a cruel, sickening parallel to Leah in the interrogation tape, digging the knife even deeper into Amara's trauma. They were taking her family away again. They were using vile violence to crush defenseless black women all over again. Amara backed away as the paramedics loaded the stretcher into the ambulance and slammed the doors. The siren wailed as it sped off toward the hospital, leaving Amara standing frozen between the freezing night air and the suffocating heat of the ashes. Sloan walked up, her eyes totally cold and deadly. Boss, you need to see this. Sloan led Amara around the side of the house, where the fire hadn't completely destroyed the brick wall yet. Under the weak beam of a flashlight, a message hastily sprayed in bright red paint dripped down the bricks like disgusting bloodstains. It was a blatant threat, silence or ashes. It wasn't just a warning. It was the pure arrogance of people who thought they were above the law. They actually thought that death and destruction would make a black woman shrink back and hide in fear. They thought this fire would burn away her willpower. But they had made a fatal mistake. The red glow of the dying fire reflected in Amara's eyes, but there was zero warmth left in them, only the freezing chill of a morgue. No tears fell. All her pain compressed into a literal nuclear core, just waiting to detonate. Standing in front of the ashes of her childhood home, staring dead at that blood-red threat, Amara Kingsley made a vow. Sloan, Amara said, her voice hoarse but packing an unstoppable, destructive energy. No more boundaries, no more rules of engagement. She turned back to look at the smoking ruins. They want to play with fire? Fine. I'll show them what real fire looks like. Amara swore to completely bulldoze their entire toxic, corrupt power system to the ground. She wasn't going to leave a single brick standing or a single penny in their accounts. The Carmichael family wasn't just going to go bankrupt, they were going to be crushed into dust, and she was going to personally sprinkle their ashes over the grave of her past. The real endgame had officially begun. The hallway of the intensive care unit ICU reeked of antiseptics and cold, dead silence. Amara sat there, heavy bags under her eyes, staring through the glass at her mom, Josephine, who was lying totally motionless, hooked up to a mess of breathing tubes and IV drips. The fire last night was a cowardly low blow, a desperate attempt by the Carmichael family to break her spirit. But before the trauma could even settle, the corrupt power system clapped back. Heavy footsteps broke the silence. 6 FBI agents in black windbreakers with completely deadpan faces suddenly stormed into the hospital. They literally didn't care that this was a quiet zone for critical patients. The lead agent flashed his badge, sounding totally robotic and arrogant. Amara Kingsley, you're under arrest for financial fraud, market manipulation, and embezzlement. It was a total frame-up, a hastily patched together but heavy-hitting setup. Using his shady connections and dirty money, Arthur Carmichael pulled strings in the justice system to get Amara in handcuffs at her absolute lowest point. She didn't fight back. As the cold metal cuffs snapped onto her wrists, Amara just looked at Sloan and gave a tiny nod, a silent message, it's go time. At the exact same time in a Manhattan skyscraper, Arthur's faction on the OmniCrypt board called an emergency meeting. Using the excuse that their CEO was facing jail time and ruining the company's rep, they held a vote. In just 15 minutes, it was done. Amara Kingsley was officially ousted from the CEO seat she literally built with her own blood and sweat. In his oak-paneled office, Arthur Carmichael smirked. He poured himself an expensive glass of wine, totally gassing himself up, thinking he had won again. In his eyes, Amara was just a disrespectful roadblock, and he fully believed he had successfully broken the arrogant black woman who dared to challenge the white elite status quo. But they were so incredibly wrong. The real game was just starting. In the FBI holding cell, Amara sat as still as a statue. She didn't call the company's lawyers because she knew they were already bought out. Suddenly, the heavy steel door swung open. It wasn't an interrogator walking in. It was Constance Whitmore. Constance, 60, wasn't just a billionaire. She was a powerhouse black media mogul, a living legend who used her brilliant mind and ruthless energy to shatter every glass ceiling the white elite put in her way, climbing straight to the absolute top. Rocking a bright red power suit and a deadly glare, Constance and her private legal team took exactly 10 minutes to shred the bogus arrest warrant and bail Amara out of the precinct. They really thought they could use these cheap tricks to lock you up. Constance scoffed as they stepped into a waiting black Rolls-Royce. Delusional. The car sped out of the city, leaving the flashing lights of Manhattan behind, heading straight for a private mansion hidden deep in the woods of Westchester. No media spies. No backstabbers. This was the ultimate safe house for people who refused to bow down. When the oak doors of the mansion's library opened, Amara walked in and gave her first genuine smile since the gala. Sitting around a massive circular table were 8 absolute badasses. These weren't trophy wives. Most of them were elite black female leaders, hardcore civil rights lawyers, and marginalized women who had stomped all over societal prejudices to reach the top of their fields. They were the definition of resilience, power, and scars that had healed into armor. Constance walked to the head of the table, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. She smirked, a look full of biting sarcasm and fierce pride. A rich white family really thinks they can easily crush a black woman just because she dared to stand up and challenge them. Constance said, her voice deep and powerful. We've literally seen this script way too many times. They think their power is absolute. But tonight, we're rewriting the ending to their toxic little playbook. Nods of agreement went around the room. Amara stepped up. She placed her leather briefcase on the table and unlocked it. Inside wasn't a weapon. It was a stack of papers with the destructive power of a nuke. Amara laid out a contract for a secret trust fund. Arthur Carmichael and his boardroom puppets really thought they could steal OmniCrypt from me. But they missed one tiny detail. I never fully trusted their system. This trust held exactly 49% of OmniCrypt's preferred shares. And the biggest flex? The total voting rights for that massive chunk of equity weren't controlled by Wall Street bros. They were sitting right in the hands of the women in this very room. They were the ultimate shield, the safety net Amara had quietly built years ago. With this combined 49% voting power, plus my personal shares, that little boardroom coup they pulled this morning is completely invalid. Amara announced, her eyes glowing. The ultimate reverse Uno card had been played. But they weren't just stopping at taking the company back. A civil rights lawyer at the corner of the table pushed forward a thick file. I just submitted all the receipts from Greta's steel briefcase to a Supreme Court judge. Massive emergency search warrants for Carmichael Holdings headquarters and their bank accounts have been fully signed off. The raid starts at exactly 6 a.m. tomorrow. Constance Whitmore tapped her fingers on the table, her smirk turning ice cold. And my media empire is fully locked and loaded. At exactly 6 a.m., every single expose on their real estate crimes, Arthur's corruption, and most importantly, Leah's tape will drop simultaneously across every major platform and news network. Nobody is covering this up anymore. The trap was perfectly set, flawless with zero loopholes. The women in this room had merged into an unstoppable force, a Category 5 hurricane ready to wipe out anything in its path. Arthur Carmichael thought he had buried one lonely woman, but he had no idea he just woke up an entire alliance of iron roses, women ready to put his toxic empire in the grave. Tonight would literally be the last time the Carmichael family ever slept peacefully. Chapter 6, the Empire's flop era and the ultimate justice era exactly 6 a.m. As the sun came up over the cold concrete of Manhattan, a literal earthquake hit the elite world. The trap was sprung. The Iron Roses Alliance pulled the trigger. Across every major news network, massive exposés and Leah's VHS tape dropped simultaneously, completely shredding the fake glamorous masks of New York's most toxic family. At that exact moment, the FBI launched a massive coordinated raid on the Carmichael Holdings headquarters. Up in the glass penthouse, Arthur Carmichael was standing completely froze in front of his TV. When the FBI agents kicked down his gold-plated mahogany doors, the arrogant billionaire was so shocked he dropped his expensive red wine, shattering the glass all over his Persian rug. The red liquid stained the floor, literally matching the way his empire was bleeding out. As the cold metal cuffs snapped onto his wrists, Arthur was still fighting it, yapping frantically about his connections, his untouchable power, and the politicians he bought off. But the law literally left him on read. His era was officially over. 10 miles away, at an exclusive, secluded luxury spa, the sauna doors flew open. Vivian Carmichael got dragged out looking completely bewildered. Not even caring about the other bougie clients around, she threw a massive tantrum, screaming until her voice gave out, demanding her lawyers. Her elite superiority complex completely shattered, turning her into an absolute mess as she got perp walked through the lobby while paparazzi cameras flashed relentlessly. But the most satisfying cinematic moment happened right outside the police precinct. Preston Carmichael, the arrogant Nepo baby who used to step all over people's lives, was slumped in the back of a police cruiser, looking completely defeated. All his cocky energy was gone. His eyes were wide with pure panic as he stared out the bulletproof glass. Outside the barricades, thousands of black protesters and marginalized folks flooded the streets, holding up Leah's picture and chanting for justice with an energy that shook the city. In that moment, Preston finally got his reality check. He wasn't a god anymore. He was just a criminal waiting for karma to catch up. The Carmichael trial wiped out the last traces of their elite privilege. The billion-dollar defense their lawyers tried to put up got completely bulldozed by hard evidence. In the courtroom, the internal receipts and financial records from Greta Holloway's briefcase exposed every single one of their toxic financial crimes. And when Leah's VHS tape was played again in the dead silent Supreme Court, no amount of gaslighting or fake PR could save them. The Carmichael family was officially permanently canceled. Their elite white privilege, the invisible shield they flexed so hard, was totally useless against the ultimate justice. The verdicts dropped, and the public went wild. For his vile crimes, Preston Carmichael was handed 15 years in prison with zero chance of parole. Vivian Carmichael, who enabled the abuse and destroyed a victim's dignity, got 8 years. And Arthur Carmichael, the mastermind behind all the corruption, was slapped with lifetime house arrest, while the government seized every single penny of his assets and the empire's shares to pay for damages. The thrones they built on blood finally crumbled to dust. 1 year later, Manhattan was still glowing under the sun, but the vibe had permanently shifted. The massive skyscraper downtown, which used to be the ultimate symbol of Carmichael Holdings' toxic power, was now glowing under a brand new name, the Leah Kingsley Justice Center. The building had the ultimate glow-up. Instead of being the headquarters for greedy real estate projects that pushed black communities out of their neighborhoods, this place was now an absolute fortress of protection. Amara took the massive seized wealth from the Carmichaels and dumped it straight into this center, turning it into a massive legal and financial support fund specifically for minority communities and marginalized folks. Anyone getting bullied by the system, anyone who felt voiceless, could now walk in here and find the legal swords and shields they needed to fight back. In the brightly lit main hall during the grand opening, Amara Kingsley stood at the podium. She wasn't wearing her dark villain-era armor anymore. She looked radiant, radiating boss energy, wearing her little sister's teardrop necklace. The media's camera flashes highlighted her flawless brown skin, showing off a woman who literally walked through hell and brought back the light. Looking out at the cheering crowd, at the black mothers, the kids getting scholarships, and the families who got to keep their homes, Amara knew she fully delivered on her promise. Using her brain, her tears, and her absolute resilience, she didn't just end a toxic white family. She pulled off something way more epic. She turned the ruins of their oppression into a solid foundation for real systemic justice. That night, after everyone went home and the hall was completely peaceful, Amara locked the glass doors of the center herself. She paused for a second, looking up at the name Leah Kingsley, glowing brightly in the New York night sky. Amara smiled, a smile full of pure peace and closure. She turned and walked down the empty street, her heels clicking steadily against the pavement. Deep down, she knew the truth. The traumatic past, the darkest nights, and the most toxic prejudices of this society had finally been completely defeated. The sun didn't just rise over the city. It permanently lit up the future for everyone who used to be trapped in the dark. Thanks. Because all your like and subs, let me see your comment about the story you want to see next.